There's some people who say that there are already now 3 indictments against the former president. They argue that even if there were crimes committed here in Fulton County, a 4th indictment isn't worth all the work that would come with it. To people who say that, what would you say?
That I took an oath, and that the oath requires that I follow the law, and that if someone broke the law in Fulton County, Georgia, that I have a duty to prosecute, and that's exactly what I plan to do.
Anybody with black cousins knows that face that she just made. That was Fani Willis, the Fulton County District Attorney, earlier today. Now, we don't know much about what charges she may bring, but what we can gather is that Fani Willis is a very big proponent of using the state's Racketeer-Induced and Corrupt Organizations Act, or RICO, a statute that historically is associated with the prosecution of mafia figures. Georgia created its RICO statute in 1980 to go after street gangs and non-traditional conspiracies. Since Willis took office, the use of the Georgia RICO statute in Fulton County has multiplied. One of her high-profile indictments is Atlanta rapper Young Thug, who was arrested as part of a sprawling racketeering indictment alleging that he was the leader of a violent gang called Young Slime Life. Many are speculating that Trump and his allies could be charged under the same statute. That includes one of Atlanta's most prolific reporters, who, fascinatingly enough, has been drawn into the Trump probe. And he joins me now, George Chidi, an Atlanta journalist who has gone from reporter to witness in Fani Willis's case against Donald Trump. Plenty to unpack here. Great to meet you, Mr. Chidi. So Jahan Jones, who does the Readout blog, is who hipped us to you. And tell us very briefly about your coverage, including of this Young Thug prosecution, just so people can understand your work.
So I work on criminal justice and journalism, and particularly how it connects to politics. So I've been working on a podcast for the last few months called King Slime, and it's going to be about the YSL case and how RICO is applied in Fulton County. It's been a wild ride, I have to tell you. The court case itself is nuts.
Yeah. But how then did you go from that? And you're a very prolific reporter, and we internally know a lot more about you. How did you then end up pulled into the Trump and the fake electors case? Tell us that story.
So in December of 2020, when the electors were meeting to do their vote, I went to the Capitol, the state Capitol, because I wanted to observe that. And I was a little concerned that political extremists may try to disrupt it. As it happens, I recognized one of the Republican electors, one of the people who would have been an elector. And he went into a room in the Capitol, and I thought that was curious. So I followed him in with my camera going, and lo and behold, I entered the room where it was happening. The Republican so-called electors were having their meeting right then. And they pretty quickly threw me out of the room. But before they did, I asked what they were doing. They said it was an education meeting, and so they were not truthful with me. And because of that, I've been subpoenaed to go and testify to that in front of the Trump grand jury here in Fulton County.
There are so many interesting sort of parallels here. So in this case, the Young Thug case, how do you think that RICO statute that's being used against him, which seems unusual to use it against a rapper, could apply to Donald Trump?
So the racketeering law is essentially saying 2 people or more in a conspiracy that are engaged in an act that is illegal. And, if you're a street gang that's engaged in illegal activity, as they accuse Young Thug and 27 other people of doing, like, from a legal perspective, it's almost exactly the same sort of thing. It is the same law that Donald Trump might be charged under. It's the same people in Fani Willis's office that are investigating both that and, gang crime in Atlanta.
And based on your reporting on Fani Willis, would it surprise you if she didn't charge Donald Trump with racketeering or with some other crime?
There's a real question there. There's some speculation. And I don't want to get too deep into that because I'm a witness, which is awful.
It's true.
But I will say that when you look at the Michigan case, Donald Trump wasn't charged, even though they charged the so-called fake electors there. And so maybe there's a parallel that will happen here. I think the distinction, though, is that there's a phone call to the Secretary of State's office. And so the quality and quantity of the evidence here is a little different.
Have you ever, as a journalist, been called as a witness in any case, any case?
Never, never, ever. And under normal circumstances, I would never show up and testify in front of a grand jury. Like the relationship between a journalist and power needs to be adversarial. I am not an agent of the government. If you want to know what I know, read what I am writing. Mm-hmm. The circumstances here are a little different because of the nature of what I'm being asked to testify to. Yeah. And the case.
Just a little bit different. Atlanta journalist George Teedy, I hope you will come back. This is a fascinating story. Thank you.